Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum all my dear friends and English literature aspirants. This is your host Samya Umar and you're watching MA English Part 1 and 2 notes. Today I'm going to cover a very important topic that mostly students are asking me again and again, how to write a brilliant reference to the context. जी ये वो क्वेश्चन है जो कि कंपलसरी है और लाजमी पेपर्स में आता है. For most people this is the toughest question because here you can't rely on guides. The guides do not explain each and every line of the text, so the students realize they will have to do something more than just learning by rote. Well, that's true enough. You do have to read the original text. There is no escaping it. So all I can do here is to help you read the text and eventually explain as much of it as I can. Next is how to set up all this. The guides finally. Here is a place where guides and net can actually help you. Pick up a guide or search online, or ideally do both. Read about the background of the poem, some general information about the poet, when was the poem written, what it stands for, the story, etc. etc. But do not get into too much detail as it is not needed. It's just for your understanding that you should be doing this. And be aware. The guides out there are simply choking with pasted material with difficult words and unrelated information. So use your common sense while pursuing one of these guides. Next is the mythology. After you get the gist of the poem, you can proceed to reading the actual text of the poem. Remember, the classical poetry is full of Greek and Roman mythology. Almost in every line, you will get stuck at some point because of difficult names of gods, goddesses, and stories. Don't worry, there are usually explanatory notes at the end of the guidebooks. You can consult them while reading. The next step is write down the meanings on your book. Your first reading is bound to be slow as you will have to stop at several places to consult a dictionary or the explanatory notes. It is always best to write the meanings down on your book so you have them handy at your next reading. Difficult pronunciations. There are lots of difficult words, names of mythological figures, etc. that you don't know how to pronounce. Tough it does not directly matter. Being unable to pronounce most of the words in a line creates problems in remembering names, places, and other stuff, besides slowing you down in your reading progress. So you need to keep an audio dictionary handy while you are reading. Look up the pronunciations and write them down, preferably over the words. You can find hundreds of audible dictionaries over the web, or you can download one on your Android phone from Google Play Store. Most important, students, give it a second and a third and a fourth reading. No, I'm not mad. While you might think now that it would be a total waste of time, trust me, it's not. This is the way I prepared for the reference question, and it helps you with other questions as well. It also helps you memorize the verses to quote in your answers. Now, by reading a poem multiple times, I don't mean just reading it. It means you need to read and understand what's written there. After your first laborious reading, you will gain pace and start enjoying it. As you read, try to remember what a particular mythological reference was about and why it was used there. Remember, you don't need to explain those stories in your paper, but you must know what they signify so you can explain why they have been referred to at that particular place. Next step is explain the story or the theme to yourself in your own words. After you completely understand the poem, you should be able to tell yourself what the whole story is. For example, if you're reading Paradise Lost, Book 9, you should be able to tell from where it begins, what happens first, then how the story unfolds, what's the climax, where it ends. If you have time, I would strongly recommend writing it down in your own words just for yourself. After that, break it into parts. Now that you know the whole story, you need to break it into smaller sections so you can remember from which part of the story a particular line has been taken, what happened before it, who said a particular line, etc. Take the example of Paradise Lost again. Break it into sections like this. What was happening when the poem began? What had happened? Before, the poet explains how Adam and Eve were living in paradise. At what point did the poet explain or describe Adam and Eve's appearance, etc., etc. In this way, no matter where a verse is taken from, you will be able to explain it with reference to the context. Most important, students, how to attempt the question. Attempting the question. What is meant by reference to the context? Simply, it means you don't just have to explain the given lines, but also what led to the given verses. That is, what was happening immediately before the given verses. It does not mean that you have to write a summary of the whole poem, which would be ridiculous, especially if a verse was taken from the last part of a poem. It means you have to go a little way back and explain the nearest important events. Also, you have to give information about the work from which the lines are taken, that is, the name of the poet and the poem. Next is writing the reference. Some people write the reference under a separate heading, but I don't prefer that way. I prefer to the other way around, that is, to simply write under the heading of reference to the context in which they give the reference and write the context also. Either way, you mention the names of both the poem or drama and the poet or author. For example, reference. These outstanding lines have been extracted from the epic poem Paradise Lost, penned by John Milton. Next step is writing the context. Don't go into a lot of details in the context. Remember, the main part of the question is about explanation of the text. Also, you have to explain 4 parts, not just one. The marks of each part are also limited. Writing too much will only lead to wastage of time. First, give a very short overview of the poem in as little words as possible. Then, from the next paragraph, write a very short summary of the events just before the given lines. I will explain in my later post with examples. In case of a poem where there is no story, like the poems of Wyatt, simply write a short summary of the poem, explain its theme, etc. Similarly, if a poem's first lines are taken, take the same approach. Next is writing the explanation. In the first paragraph, simply rewrite the lines in your own simpler words. You can add explanatory words to better explain the lines. In the next paragraph, explain the hidden meanings of the lines, what the poet wants to show us through a dialogue, what message he wants to convey, etc. Remember, you have to explain the lines in the context of the poem. Now I'll give you an example from my own handwritten notes. You can see on the screen Hedda Gabler. This is modern drama from MA English Part 2, written by Henrik Ibsen. Lines हैं जनाब, I knew all about it, but he had declined the invitation. For now, as you know, he has become a new man. जी, अब जिसने भी रीडिंग दी होगी कम से कम 3 to 4 टाइम्स, उसको तो देखते ही पता चल जाएगा कि ये लाइंस किसने अटर की थी और किसको कही गई थी और इसकी बैकग्राउंड क्या है और इसकी एक्सप्लेनेशन क्या होगी. Here you can see on the screen के रेफरेंस टू द कॉन्टेक्स्ट की हेडिंग के अंडर रेफरेंस और कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेपरेट हेडिंग्स दी गई हैं. आपने इस तरह नहीं करना. आपने रेफरेंस टू द कॉन्टेक्स्ट के बाद पहले रेफरेंस लिख कर नेक्स्ट लाइन से कॉन्टेक्स्ट लिखना. These lines have been extracted from the modern play Hedda Gabler written by Henrik Ibsen. These lines occur in Act 3. ये एक्ट आप तभी लिखेंगे जब आपको अच्छी तरह श्योर हो कि ये उसी एक्ट में से लाइन्स दी गई हैं. कॉन्टेक्स्ट आपने लिखना है. Hedda Gabler, the famous daughter of General Gabler, married George Tasman out of desperation, but she found life with him to be dull and tedious. During their wedding trip, her husband spent most of the time in libraries doing research in history for a book that is soon to be published. ये आपने देखा होगा कि मैं जिस तरह से एक्सप्लेन कर रही हूँ यहाँ पे बैकग्राउंड, ये एक शॉर्ट समरी है और ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप पूरी की पूरी समरी उठा के लिख दें, कि आपने इन लाइंस से थोड़े पहले जो कुछ हो चुका है वो लिखना है, यानी जो बैकग्राउंड है उन लाइंस का, जो इवेंट्स हो चुके हैं उन लाइंस से थोड़ा पहले. सो कॉन्टेक्स्ट को आप एक शॉर्ट समरी कंसिडर कर सकते हैं, या आप कह सकते हैं बैकग्राउंड ऑफ एनी पोएम और ड्रामा, या जो गिवन लाइंस हैं उसका बैकग्राउंड. यहाँ पे एक्सप्लेनेशन की तरफ जाते हैं. Judge Bragg speaks these lines to Hedda in Act 3 after Tasman's hurried departure. Bragg pays Hedda a visit. He inquires Hedda if her husband tells her about last night's adventure. ये आपने उन लाइन्स से क्या मतलब है वो बयान करना है. वो लाइन्स किसने कहीं, किसको और किस एक्ट में, ये भी लिखना है. उन लाइंस के पीछे क्या हिडन मीनिंग है वो लिखना है. मेन थीम लिखना है कि पोएम अगर है तो उसका मेन थीम क्या है. और वो जो गिवन लाइंस हैं उनका मेन आइडिया क्या है वो लिखेंगे आप। इसके बाद लाइंस ये है कि होता है अक्सर स्टूडेंट्स यही पूछते हैं कि जी हमारी एक्सप्लेनेशन तो हम इतना लंबा कैसे करें उसको, ये तो बड़े कुछ कम लाइंस आ गई हैं, इसको हम लेंथ कैसे दें। तो लेंथ देने का यही तरीका है कि आपने लाइंस का तो आपने स्पेसिफिक रहना है और आपने वो डिस्क्राइब कर दी। उसके बाद का जो सिनेरियो है वो आपने 2-3 लाइंस में एक्सप्लेन करना है। ऑल्सो यू कैन ऐड अ कोटेशन एज वेल। ठीक है, तो ये तरीका होता है कि आप थोड़ी सी लेंथ दे देते हैं और एग्ज़ामिनर जो है वो लेंथ नहीं क्वालिटी को भी देखता है कि आपने कोई ग्रामेटिकल मिस्टेक्स नहीं की हुई और आपने जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वो आपके माइंड में क्लियर है। Students, I hope you have understood it and one more thing, practice makes the man perfect. जी, आप लोग जितनी ज़्यादा प्रैक्टिस करेंगे इसकी उतना ज़्यादा आप बेहतर लिख पाएंगे। ऑल्सो ट्राई टू गिव एटलीस्ट 2 to 3 times रीडिंग बिफोर एग्ज़ामिनेशन, ताकि वो उस वक्त फ्रेश आपके माइंड में होता है कि आपने जो रीडिंग दी होती है उसके अकॉर्डिंग आपको पता होता है कि किस एक्ट में क्या हुआ है। ऑल्सो एक्ट वाइज समरी भी आप पढ़ें ताकि आपको पता हो, उसका गेस्ट आप लिखें, पॉइंट्स लिखिए कि किस एक्ट में क्या हुआ था इवेंट वाइज, सो दैट यू शुड नो कि जैसी लाइंस आएँ तो आपको पता हो कि ये इस एक्ट से आई हैं और ये इस पर्टिकुलर कैरेक्टर ने ये लाइंस बोली थी। इसी तरह पोएम का भी मैं आपको यही कहूँगी कि पोएम्स को गो थ्रू करें एटलीस्ट 3 to 4 times. Till then, students, this is your host Samya Omar signing off from MA English Part 1 and 2 notes. Don't forget to like my video and also subscribe my channel for more informative and quality notes videos. Also press the bell icon for notifications. Comment below if you have any sort of questions or queries. I would be really glad to answer you all. Take care and Allah Hafiz.